If you've built a business, hit the numbers, check the boxes, but now you're quietly asking yourself, what's the point? It doesn't mean you're in crisis. It means you're in the matriarch phase or you're about to enter it. And I've been hearing this question come up a lot lately among accomplished Gen X women, and it's not random. There's a biological reason the question starts happening when it does, a structural reason your business starts feeling like it doesn't fit anymore, and a strategic reason why the old playbook stops working. And today, we're going to go into all three. So welcome to the Frequency of Yes, the podcast for women leaders creating limitless success, deep empowerment, and divine wealth on their terms. I am Kirstin Carey, and I'm obsessed with helping badass women feel good in their bodies so they can sustain wildly successful businesses without grinding or sacrificing themselves. So let's start where this really begins, because it's not at 50 and it's not when your business just stops feeling good. It starts a lot earlier, and it has two tracks running simultaneously underneath. The first track is conditioning. Women who grew up in the 70s and 80s learned really early on that striving was currency. You worked for the grade, for the approval, for the win. And the moment you got the win, the expectation was already on the next one. And nobody taught us how to sit in it or absorb what we had just accomplished. And we certainly weren't encouraged to feel into what we had learned from what didn't work out. We just kept moving because that was what was rewarded. And we got really good at executing our lives efficiently without stopping to actually experience them. And what got lost in all of that was this ability to experience our own lives, not just push through them. Most of us didn't even know what was missing because we were too busy proving our worth to stop and feel what we had been building. Now, the second track is the biology. Perimenopause is a full system recalibration, typically lasting anywhere from 3 to 10 years. Estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, thyroid, adrenal function, they're all shifting at the same time. And what that does to your energy, your emotional responses, your digestion, your sleep, and your tolerance for work that feels out of alignment is profound. Your body is no longer willing to override what it needs the way that it used to. And women often interpret that as losing capacity and getting old. But what's really happening is your body is telling you that the old pace was never sustainable, and it's run out of patience for pretending otherwise. Now, this is the moment when psychology and physiology converge. Decades of conditioning to prove your worth colliding with a biology that is done performing. And that convergence, it's what produces the identity shift and often the identity crisis that most women in this phase feel, but they can't fully express. Because it's not burnout, because burnout is depletion. This is a recalibration. And those two things call for completely different responses. So here's what I see happening with women at this level all the time. The business grows, the structure gets more layered and tiered. And you do what all the experts tell you to do. You remove yourself from the front lines, you build a team, you stop doing the one-on-one work yourself because that's what scaling is supposed to look like. And from a pure structural standpoint, you did it right. But that model was built predominantly by men for men, and it doesn't account for something that matters really deeply in how most women lead. For a lot of men, moving further from the front line works for them because their leadership doesn't require deep connection to stay aligned in their brilliance. For most women, connection is where their intelligence lives, where the brilliance of what they do actually resides. And when you move too far from your clients, from the real conversations, from the texture of what they're struggling with right now, you lose touch with the heartbeat of your own business. And when you lose that, you stop being able to pivot so quickly. You stop seeing the gaps as clearly, and you lose the thread of why you started all of this in the first place. So when you move too far from the front lines, you lose touch with what your clients need and from what you need. And when you lose that, the whole business starts to drift. So I lived this. I had built my health and wellness company the right way, with a team of coaches handling the one-on-one work and with me stepping in for the group Q&A and the high-level teaching. Structurally, it absolutely made sense. But I missed the connection. I felt so disconnected. I'd shifted into wanting more depth, more in-person work, higher level concepts. And I could feel that the company that I had built was serving a past version of me and not the woman that I was becoming. And here's exactly where most women get stuck. When you know there's a need to make a change, and then that change means hard calls about the real people in your life, you tend to stay a lot longer than you should have. And for me, it was 2 years I stayed beyond when I knew it was time to shift. And my husband had worked for me for more than 10 years, and he was a major part of my team. But I also knew that if I made the pivots I really wanted to make, he was going to need to find a new job at 55. And many of my team members were going to have to do the same thing. The guilt around that kept me on a path I increasingly resented because the cost of changing felt so much bigger than the cost of staying. And maybe it's the same for you. Maybe it is a long-term team member, or maybe it's clients that you feel responsible for, or an offer that pays you really well, but you're just so tired of delivering. The specifics are different for everybody, but the pattern is the same. Guilt and fear keeping you in a version of your business that stopped fitting you, while your body keeps turning up the volume on what it needs you to hear and trying to get your attention. So before menopause, let's talk about the biology of this. Your ovaries and your adrenal glands share hormone production about 50-50. As perimenopause progresses, the ovaries slow down the sex hormone production and the adrenals are supposed to pick up the slack. But if your adrenals are already overtaxed from years of pushing and grinding and chronic stress, they don't have the reserve to pick up that difference. And then that's when everything starts to really cascade. Sleep fractures, energy becomes unpredictable, brain fog moves in, weight shifts to the midsection and gets stuck there. And your emotional responses tend to be overreactive. So I want to address something that also doesn't get talked about enough in this kind of conversation. A significant number of women in this generation were offered hysterectomies as the solution to many of our monthly problems, because frankly, the medical system couldn't be bothered to spend enough time studying women's health and didn't have another alternative for us. So let's just take out the parts that no longer work, right? So many of those women were not given a full picture of what surgical menopause was going to mean hormonally or energetically or emotionally over the long haul. So they didn't move gradually into this phase. They were shoved, sometimes in their 30s or early 40s, suddenly, and without the support to really understand what was happening. And then their bodies were pushed into a hormonal reality that neither their body or their identity could really handle. And that was unnecessarily hard. And if that was you, I am 100% not saying you made the wrong choice. What I'm saying is that you weren't given the chance to arrive here on your own terms with the right support. And the confusion and the grief that many women describe when that happened to them, it's completely understandable. And so if that was you, I am so glad that you're also here. Now, whether this phase arrived gradually for you or all at once, most women describe the same thing: a growing sense that the life and the business they built no longer fits who they've become. And that feeling is pointing somewhere. It's asking a question that most of us were really never taught to answer. What is all this really for? Recently, a friend of mine was telling me about this woman that she'd seen interviewed who had a near-death experience. And what that woman described finding on the other side was so simple and so profound that I adopted it as a perspective for myself and have been using it with my clients. So apparently, once she got to the other side, she discovered that all of the things that we typically use to measure our life, the money, the scaling, the accolades, none of it actually mattered. What mattered, as she explained it, was growth, personal growth, and contributing to the growth of the people around her. And that was the lens that everything apparently was measured by. So when you take the profound simplicity of that and you use it as your measure, it changes your experience moving into this phase. So if you use this as a lens and you look over your calendar or your offers or your decisions, ask yourself, are you growing? Are you contributing to the growth of yourself? Are you contributing to the growth of the women that you serve? And the women you serve can be your clients, could be your daughters, could be your friends, could be your mother. Whatever falls into the yes category is what you want to keep in your life. And what doesn't, I'm not saying to get rid of necessarily, but what doesn't fit, it's a candidate for you to redesign it. So let's go a little bit deeper into what this phase that I've been talking about actually requires, because understanding it and knowing how to recognize it in yourself are two totally different things. So quick context, if you missed the last episode, episode 21, we talked about the matriarch phase. It's a fourth developmental stage that sits between the mother phase and the crone phase. There are basically three phases. There's the maiden phase, mother phase, and the crone phase. So it's a phase that's emerged, this matriarch phase, because of Gen X, because Gen X women we have more to give right now. We have more to build and we have more to lead. And the traditional three-phase model simply didn't account for this part of our lives. It's about leading from what you've built rather than grinding inside of it. So if you missed it, go back and listen to episode 21 if you want the full framework. But for the women who built hard through the mother phase, this recalibration is going to happen one way or the other. The only variable is whether you're forced into it or whether you do it with intention. And the women who move through it well, they're not necessarily more resilient or more enlightened. They're simply paying attention and they're actively taking steps to make the transition work for them. So the matriarch phase, it's not about doing less. It's about leading from a different place. And there are three markers that tell you that you're in it. The first one is that you start to feel this pull back towards a deeper connection, not towards doing everything yourself, but towards your inherent genius and to the clients who need what only you can offer. The conversations that use your deepest genius and your expertise. The parts of your business where your presence isn't just useful, it's irreplaceable. And if you've been feeling disconnected from the work that lit you up when you first got started, that's not dissatisfaction. That's your intelligence telling you that something has drifted too far from source. Now, the second marker is that your relationship with capacity starts to shift. The volume that felt manageable at 38 doesn't feel manageable now. Women who try to push through that gap by working harder, they typically hit a wall that does not move. And this isn't a productivity problem. This is a design problem. The business was built around the version of you that no longer exists. And the third marker is that you need to prove yourself. That just goes away. There's no F's to give anymore, right? In the mother phase, there was always something to prove to the clients, to the market, to yourself. But that drive is it's what built the thing. And it was exciting and it was awesome. But at some point, the drive stops being the fuel behind everything and it starts feeling like pressure. And when you find yourself less interested in convincing and pushing and more interested in doing deep work with the people who already get it, you're not losing the ambition. You're shifting from proving to embodying. And that's the third marker. And it's the one that changes everything about how you show up, who you attract, and what your business becomes. So I'll tell you how this looked in my own life. I bought the house that I live in now when I was 45, 2.5 acres with Superstition Mountains in my backyard. The views are unbelievable. And I knew from the moment I stepped onto this property what it was really for. I could see the retreats. I could see the women who would come here. I could feel the energy of what was possible in this space. And for many of the years that followed, I ran group retreats here, and they were transformative. And they were transformative for my clients, but also for me too. because I was already living into the next chapter before I had a full way to explain it. And then the day I turned 50, something shifted again. And it wasn't about what I was building anymore. It was about the depth from which I wanted to lead. So less scale, more meaning, less breadth and more depth. And I got clear that the front lines weren't what was really burning me out. It was where my best work really occurred. So now at 52, I'm opening back up to one-on-one work again. I'm doing private retreats, personal coaching from connection and from choice, not from grind. And that's what the third shift really looks like in reality. So let me make this really practical so your intellect is really happy, because I really don't want you to leave this episode feeling inspired for a while, but then going right back into the old patterns. What I really want is for this to stick and to have real impact on you. So first, name what it is that you really want. Not what scales, not what your team was built around, and not what made sense for the version of you who started the business. But what do you right now want to be doing in your business? Let go of all the constraints of how to make it happen or what feels possible right now. And just answer the question, what do you want? And say your answer out loud, not in your head, but actually out loud. Most women at this level haven't done this for years, if they've done this at all. And the moment you say it, you start moving towards it. And the things that don't belong start becoming really obvious. Now, second, run the growth lens over your business this week. Look at everything you spend your time doing and all the appointments on your calendar and ask yourself, does this contribute to my growth or the growth of the women I serve? And if the answer is no, then it goes on the list of things that need to be looked at. The matriarch doesn't fill her calendar out of obligation. She fills it with unapologetic intention. And third, put light onto one decision that you've been avoiding. I know there's one. I know there is. The client relationship that's run its course, the team member whose role just no longer fits here, or the offer that you resent, but you keep delivering. Or maybe it's the business model that made sense at 38 and now feels like it doesn't fit you anymore. And no matter what you say or what comes out of this, you don't have to act on it today. All you have to do is give it a name. Write it down. The 2 years I spent on not acting on what I already knew was costing the energy and costing my capacity of what I just didn't have to give. The moment I said it out loud, even just to myself, the loop broke. The restlessness, the grief, the sense that something is coming to a close, even though nothing's technically gone wrong, that's your whole system telling you that you've outgrown the frame that you've been living inside and that you're ready for something new. So the question really isn't, what's the point? The question is, does this business serve my growth in my matriarch phase? Now, I've spent more than 30 years working with women in business. And the last 15 of those, I specifically was helping women navigate the intersection of hormonal shifts, identity transition, and business redesign. I've watched this shift hundreds of times. I know what it looks like when a woman is at the threshold of the matriarch phase, and I know what it takes to move through it with her body and her business intact. And when women come to me at this threshold, there are 3 levels of recalibration depending on where they are. Some women need clarity first. They need a clear read on what's not working and where the leverage is. Some women want a full redesign. They want 6 months of working through the structural and strategic shifts and the biological changes that this shift and this phase demands. Some women want a full immersion where we take everything off the table, we go deep, and we rebuild from the inside out. The retreat is that 3rd level. And if you want to do something about it and you want to go deep like that, I want to invite you to come to Arizona and work with me. The richly resourced personal retreat It's 2 days, one focus, and that focus is you. We work on your business, your offers, your positioning, and your strategy for this next phase. And most importantly, we work on the woman running it, your nervous system, your body, your capacity to receive what you're building. And we do it at my home in Superstition Mountains. I will cook for you. I am a chef. I owned restaurants for 10 years. We're going to weave energy work and somatic integration throughout the entire experience. And then you're going to leave with a complete strategic roadmap and a body that can handle and execute it. Every retreat is built entirely on you. And I only do a small handful a year, one per month. And I don't do it during the hottest points of the summer. So look, go check out the details. The application, they're both at evolveminded.com/retreat. But take a look. And if it feels like a yes, and you can feel the energy moving you towards it, just trust that, submit an application, and then we'll have a conversation on, is it the right thing for you right now? All right, deep breath. I will see you on the next episode. Have a good rest of your day.